The November wind cut sharp across Boston streets, sending wrappers and scraps of paper tumbling along the gutters. The lights from Hartwell's, the city's most exclusive restaurant, glowed like golden promises against the dark night, spilling warmth and laughter into a world where Emma had neither. She stood pressed against the brick wall of an alley, her thin jacket no match for the cold. 7 years old and already used to hunger, she had learned how to wait, how to spot a chance when others looked past it, her stomach twisted, aching, for even the smallest piece of bread. But what kept her rooted to the sidewalk was not just hunger, it was the strange pull of something she couldn't explain. The polished windows reflected glittering chandeliers and well-dressed patrons lifting glasses of wine. Emma watched them with wide, hollow eyes, knowing from experience that when the rich feasted, scraps sometimes found their way outside. Tonight, her attention snapped to a tall man stepping out into the night. His suit looked like it had never known a wrinkle, his presence carrying the weight of someone who ruled over boardrooms and numbers instead of people. William Montgomery, the name she had overheard more than once from the doorman, Felix, who sometimes slipped her old roles when no one was looking. But it wasn't the man who made Emma's heart beat faster, it was the boy at his side, about her age, maybe a little younger. His hand was locked inside his father's as though he needed guiding. His face was pale, his eyes distant, unfocused, the look of someone who lived in silence. Emma tilted her head, recognizing it in a way she couldn't explain. She had seen children laugh, cry, shout, and tease, but this boy carried none of that. He was like a closed book. "That's Montgomery's boy," Felix had muttered once, when she lingered by the restaurant steps, all the money in the world. And still the little fella's never spoken a word. The words had stuck with her. Tonight, watching the boy shuffle beside his father, Emma felt something stir. Not pity, not even curiosity, something more like recognition. Like remembering a dream you weren't sure was yours. Her hunger roared through her chest, urging her forward. But the other feeling, stranger and heavier, gave her courage she didn't know she still had. She darted across the street, weaving between headlights, her bare shoes slapping the pavement. "Sir, sir, please," she called, her voice too small against the noise of cars and laughter. Montgomery slowed, turned, his sharp eyes taking her in at once. The tangled hair, the ragged jacket, the desperate look of a child who belonged to the streets. His jaw tightened with the practiced patience of a man who had been approached too many times. "I don't carry cash," he said, his voice clipped, already turning away. Emma's chest heaved as she shook her head. "I don't want money," she blurted. The words that tumbled out of her mouth next made no sense, even to her. I can make your son talk." Montgomery stopped cold. His gaze sharpened, dangerous now, as though she had crossed a line. He pulled his son a little closer. "Excuse me?" Emma swallowed hard, but she stood her ground, trembling legs and all. She pointed to the boy, who was staring at her with a strange intensity, his big eyes locked on hers. "I can make him speak. If I do, could I have the leftovers from your dinner?" For a moment, silence pressed against the night. Then Montgomery's laugh cracked through the air, sharp, cold, and dismissive. "Listen, kid, go back to whatever hole you crawled out of." He shook his head in disbelief, but the boy did not move. His gaze never wavered, fixed on Emma as though he knew her. Emma's breath caught in her throat. Something was happening, something she couldn't explain. Suspense charged the air, a weight pressing down on them all. Montgomery's laugh faded when he realized his son's eyes, usually so vacant, were alive. Burning with recognition, Emma's hunger was still clawing at her ribs. But now something stronger pushed it aside, something bigger than food, bigger than fear. It was the beginning of a miracle no one was ready to believe. Asterisk, the sound of Montgomery's laugh still lingered in the cold night air, but its sharp edge softened the moment he noticed his son's eyes. Matt had stopped moving, stopped drifting in that empty, quiet world of his, and was staring at Emma like a compass needle finding true north. It was the kind of stare that burned him, blinking, steady, alive in a way William had never seen it. 6 years of therapies, specialists, and endless patience that yielded nothing. For a man who believed in control and explanation, it was a look that rattled him to his core. Emma didn't flinch beneath the boy's gaze. Her small hands were trembling, yes, but her chin lifted, fragile yet defiant against the weight of the world staring down at her. The November wind whipped through her jacket, but she didn't feel the cold anymore. Her hunger seemed to fade, replaced by the strange warmth of certainty she couldn't explain. She had said the words without planning, without thinking. "I can make your son talk." And now, with the boy's eyes locked on her, she believed it. Felix, the bus driver, lingered at the corner, his cap pulled low over his brow. He had finished his last route of the evening and stopped to smoke. But when he saw Emma dart across the street toward Montgomery, he felt his gut clench. He'd seen that little girl take risks before stealing half-rotten fruit from carts, slipping past security guards to warm herself in train stations, but this was different. This was a child daring to challenge one of the most powerful men in Boston. Felix flicked his cigarette aside and stepped closer, just in case. William tugged at Matt's hand, trying to break his son's stare. "Come along," he muttered. The irritation in his voice meant to shut down whatever scene was brewing. But Matt resisted, not by pulling away, not by tantrum or sound, but simply by standing still, rooted as if his feet had grown into the pavement. Then it happened. A small, clear voice rose against the hum of passing cars and the laughter spilling from Hartwell's doorway. It was thin, unpracticed, but unmistakably real. She was with me. Montgomery froze mid-step. His blood ran cold. His breath caught, and for the first time in years, he didn't know how to move. Slowly, like a man afraid of shattering glass, he turned toward the boy at his side. "What did you say?" His voice broke, all authority stripped away. Matt's lips trembled, but his eyes never left Emma's. "She was with me," he repeated, stronger this time. In Mommy's tummy, the world tilted. The street noise seemed to fade into silence. William's heart thundered in his chest, his polished exterior crumbling under the weight of words he had prayed to hear, but never expected. His son had spoken. Not a word, not a fragment sentences, and not just any sentences, but ones that carried impossible truth. Emma staggered back a step, her knees weak. Flashes of warmth, of darkness, of another presence beside her in a world before. Memory images she couldn't have invented rushed through her mind. She pressed her small hands to her temples, dizzy with recognition she didn't understand. Felix clutched the brim of his cap with shaking fingers, his mouth falling open. He had heard Matt's silence had lasted a lifetime. Now the boy's words rang with conviction, tying him to the ragged child who stood in front of him. "Daddy," Matt whispered, as though testing a sound long buried. The word carried weight enough to break William Montgomery's knees. He leaned against the sleek hood of a parked car, his face drained of color. Emma's voice, quiet but steady, cut through the stunned silence. "I don't know why, but I've been looking for him my whole life." Suspense tightened the night like a noose. William stared at her, his mind racing with 1,000 questions, each one colliding into the next. His empire had been built on logic, facts, numbers that could be controlled. But this moment defied every lie he believed in. His son had found his voice through a girl with nothing but rags on her back and hunger in her eyes. Felix stepped closer, his heart pounding. He didn't understand it yet, but something deep inside told him this was not coincidence. This was truth clawing its way out of the dark. William's voice trembled as he asked, "Who are you?" And Emma, though shivering and frail, didn't look away. She held her ground, her eyes bright with both fear and a strange certainty. "My name is Emma," she said. "I don't have a last name, but I think he's my brother." The city seemed to hold its breath. In the glow of the streetlights, anyone could see it now, the same tilt of the chin, the same wide eyes, the same fragile determination etched into two young faces. For the first time in his life, William Montgomery was afraid, not of loss, not of ruin, but of the miracle standing right in front of him. The street outside Hartwell seemed to collapse into silence, the kind that makes every passing car sound of far away and every breath too loud. William Montgomery, the man whose name could make boardrooms fall quiet, found himself speechless in the glow of the streetlights. His son, silent for 6 years, was still staring at the ragged girl, as though she carried the missing half of his soul. Emma felt the weight of it too, her stomach gnawed with hunger. But the trembling in her chest wasn't from emptiness, it was from recognition she couldn't explain. Memories that weren't memories pressed at the edge of her mind. Warmth, darkness, a heartbeat always near. She clutched her jacket tighter, shivering, not just from the November wind, but from something stranger, something bigger than herself. Felix, the bus driver, lingered just beyond them, his hands stuffed into his coat pockets. He had watched Emma scrape by for months, seen her spirit survive when most adults would have given up. But now, hearing Montgomery's voice speak to her clear as daylight, he felt like he was watching something the world would call impossible. His gut twisted, telling him not to leave. William snapped himself upright, his jaw tightening against the chaos inside him. Enough, he muttered, though his voice shook. We're going. He gripped Matt's hand, but the boy pulled away gently and, for the first time, moved toward someone else. Emma, stay, Matt whispered to her. One word. Simple, impossible. William's chest constricted. He had begged, bribed, wept, prayed for even a sound, a syllable, from his son. Yet here it was, falling so easily from the boy's lips for her. Emma's breath hitched. She bent down a little, meeting Matt's eyes. Do you want me to come with you? She asked softly. Though she wasn't sure she had the right, Matt nodded. Not vague, not uncertain, but with a clarity that stunned even him. William's face hardened. Absolutely not, he said, still returning to his voice. He looked at Emma like she was a threat, a puzzle he couldn't solve. This ends now. But Matt didn't retreat. His small hand reached out, grabbing Emma's dirt-smudged fingers with surprising strength. Sister, he whispered again. The word struck William like a blow. His wife's face flickered in his memory the night she had gone into labor. The panic, the blood, the doctor's cold pronouncement. Only one child survived. He had buried his grief in silence and work, clinging to his son as the last living piece of her. Now, standing in the freezing street, he wondered if fate had lied to him. Felix couldn't keep still anymore. He stepped forward, voice low but firm. Mr. Montgomery, he said, addressing the man like one might a wild animal. Careful not to spook him. The boy just spoke for the first time in his life. Maybe don't shut the door on whatever this is. William shot him a glare. But Felix didn't back down. He wasn't rich. He wasn't powerful. But he drove buses long enough to know when something mattered more than pride. A limo pulled up to the curb, its driver springing out to open the door. William hesitated. The world of logic inside him screamed. To walk away, to leave the girl in the gutter where she belonged. But the look on Matt's face, the quiet joy, the recognition gnawed at him. Fine, he snapped. His voice was cold, but his decision betrayed cracks in his armor. He pointed at Emma. You come, just for tonight. Then I find out who you really are. Emma swallowed hard, her heart thundering. The promise of leftovers had turned into something else entirely. She climbed into the limo after Matt, the leather seats swallowing her like a world she didn't belong in. Felix watched as the car pulled away, his reflection flickering in the polished black paint. A part of him wanted to follow. He had the sinking feeling this night was only the beginning. Inside the limo, Matt pressed himself close to Emma, whispering words his father couldn't believe were real. Don't go, please stay. Each syllable cracked William's defenses further. He sat rigid across from them, his steel blue eyes darting between the boy he thought he knew and the girl who had turned his life upside down in less than 10 minutes. Suspense clung to the silence of the ride. For Emma, it was terrifying and electric all at once, her hunger forgotten, her heart racing with a truth she had carried all her life without knowing it. For William, it was unbearable. If this girl was who Matt believed she was, then everything, the past, the death, the grief was built on a lie. When the limo pulled up to the Montgomery penthouse, the glass tower cut into the night sky like a blade. Emma stepped out, her bare shoes crunching on the marble steps, feeling smaller than ever. But Matt's hand clung to hers, steady, unshakable. William unlocked the heavy doors and led them inside, his mind unraveling with every step. His son's voice echoed in his ears, whispering sister like an accusation, and Emma, for the first time in her life, felt both fear and belonging at once. She had no idea what waited inside those glass walls, but she knew one thing with certainty. The boy beside her was hers, and she was his. The Montgomery penthouse loomed like a fortress in the sky, its glass walls glowing faintly against the black Boston skyline. Emma followed Matt and his father through the towering entrance doors, her small frame dwarfed by polished marble floors and chandeliers that sparkled like frozen stars. She had never seen so much light, so much space, so much everything in one place. The air inside carried the faint scent of leather and cologne, so clean, so distant from the alleys where she usually slept. For a moment, she wanted to shrink back into the shadows where she belonged. But Matt's tiny hand anchored her. He held on tightly, his grip warm and certain, and it kept her trembling legs. Moving forward, William walked ahead, his back straight and unyielding, but his eyes betrayed him. They flickered often toward Emma and his son, as if afraid of what he might see, or already knew what he was seeing, but refused to accept it. He had spent years building walls of logic, of science, of order. Tonight those walls were cracking, and the sound of his son's words still echoed through the fractures. The penthouse was a cathedral of silence, no laughter, no photographs on the walls, save for one framed portrait of a woman with dark hair and kind eyes. Emma's gaze locked on it instantly, her chest tightened. She had never seen that face before, yet something inside her recognized it. A pang of warmth and grief hit her at once, so strong it stole her breath. "That's Mommy," Matt whispered. His voice was quiet, unsure, as though testing the weight of words he'd never dared use before. William froze mid-step. He turned sharply, eyes wide. "What did you just say?" His voice was a rasp, almost a plea. Matt pointed at the portrait, his small hand shaking slightly. "Mommy," he said again, firmer this time. Then he added something that made the air in the room collapse into stillness. She had to. "Babies." Emma swayed on her feet, clutching the strap of her thin jacket for balance. The words struck her like a hammer, unlocking half-formed dreams that had haunted her sleep for as long as she could remember, dreams of warmth, of another heartbeat near her own, of being with someone even before she knew the world. William stumbled back a step, his face drained of all color. He clenched his fists to stop the trembling in his hands. For years he had buried that night. The night his wife had given birth and never come home again. The doctors had told him one child lived, one child was gone. He had buried one child in his grief without ever seeing her, and now, here she was, standing barefoot on his marble floors, with his son clinging to her like they had never been apart. A sharp chime broke the suffocating silence. The elevator opened, and Dr. Abernathy stepped into the penthouse. His white coat was gone, replaced by a press suit, but his eyes carried the same professional detachment that had earned William's trust. Over the years, he had been Matt's neurologist since birth, the man who tracked every failed attempt at speech therapy, every quiet session where silence won. "Mr. Montgomery," Abernathy greeted, setting down a briefcase. His tone was calm, clinical. "You sounded urgent." "Urgent?" William's voice cracked. He jabbed a finger toward Matt. "My son spoke. He's speaking, and it's because of her." He turned the finger toward Emma, his voice sharp, but his eyes betrayed fear more than anger. Abernathy's brows lifted in disbelief. He crouched beside Matt, speaking gently. "Matthew, can you say something for me?" Matt turned his face away, pressing his cheek into Emma's shoulder. His voice came out muffled, but clear. "Don't want to." Abernathy blinked, stunned. "Mr. Montgomery." He's responding voluntarily. "That's..." He cut himself off, struggling to maintain his professional mask. "This is extraordinary." Emma shifted uneasily under the doctor's stare. She wanted to shrink back into invisibility, but Matt wouldn't let go. His arms wrapped around her as though he knew she was the missing piece he'd been waiting for. William raked a hand through his hair, pacing like a man cornered. "Extraordinary? It's impossible. He ignores me, ignores everyone, and now he clings to this girl as if she's..." His voice trailed off, the word hanging unspoken between them. Abernathy's gaze sharpened. "As if she's family." The room went cold, Emma's eyes filled with tears. Though she didn't understand why, her voice shook, but she forced herself to speak. "I don't know who I am. I don't have a last name, but I've always felt like I had a brother somewhere." The word struck William like knives. His son's laughter, soft, real, alive, suddenly filled the air. Matt looked up at Emma with a smile that lit his whole face. "I found you," he whispered. Abernathy straightened slowly, his professional calm unraveling. He looked at William, then at Emma, as though weighing something he didn't want to say. His silence was heavier than words. William's fist clenched at his sides. He had lived 6 years without hope, without miracles, believing his fortune could buy answers. Tonight, his carefully ordered world was collapsing. His son spoke only to this girl. His wife's portrait seemed to watch them with sad, knowing eyes, and somewhere deep in his gut, he feared the truth he had buried was clawing its way into the light. Emma felt it to the storm building, the truth pressing closer, the marble floors, the glass walls. The chandeliers above her, they weren't protection. They were walls meant to trap secrets. And now, for the first time in her life, she was standing inside them. Asterisk, the night had deepened over Boston, but in the Montgomery penthouse time seemed to have stopped. William stood rigid by the wide glass windows, his reflection fractured in the city lights below. Behind him, Matt giggled a sound he had never made before as Emma taught him how to pour juice from a crystal pitcher into his glass. Her small, dirty hands trembled, but Matt's eyes sparkled with trust, his laughter filling the room like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. William clenched his fist tighter. Each sound from his son's mouth was a miracle, but it wasn't his miracle. It belonged to her, a girl who had appeared from nowhere, asking only for scraps. His ordered world, built on logic and control, was collapsing, and he could feel it slipping through his grip like sand. The doorbell rang. William startled, then muttered something under his breath and went to answer. Standing in the hallway was Felix, the bus driver, his hat in his hands, his face pale with something heavier than nerves. "What the hell are you doing here?" William's voice cut like a knife. Felix swallowed hard. "I saw what happened outside Hartwell's. I couldn't just go home." His eyes darted past William to Emma, who was now gently wiping Matt's mouth with a napkin, as though she'd been his sister all her life. "You have no place here," William snapped. But Felix's voice, steady and low, stopped him. "Maybe I do." Emma's head shot up, sensing the tension. She clutched Matt's hand protectively, her gaze flicking between the two men like a cornered animal. Felix stepped inside, his boots heavy against the marble. "7 years ago," he began, his voice trembling. "I was driving the midnight route when a young woman climbed onto my bus. She was scared, alone, carrying more than she could handle. She was pregnant, big pregnant with twins." His eyes landed on Emma, then on Matt. "I remember because she kept whispering the same thing. Both. I have to save both." William's face drained of color. He gripped the doorframe as though he needed it to stay upright. "Stop." Felix's jaw tightened. "I dropped her at St. Helena's shelter. It was the last time I saw her." Weeks later, the news said Montgomery's wife had died giving birth to a son. Just one. His voice cracked. "But I always wondered, what happened to the other baby?" The words sliced through the penthouse like broken glass. Emma gasped, her knees buckling. Memory surged, fragments of warmth, a voice humming lullabies in the dark, then cold streets. "Strangers, hunger. That's why I always felt him," she whispered, clutching Matt's small hand so tightly it turned red. "I wasn't wrong. Abernathy." The doctor cleared his throat, but the sound betrayed unease. He avoided William's stare. "There were complications," he muttered. "Records can be messy." "Messy?" William thundered, spinning on him. "You told me one survived. You let me bury the thought of another child." His voice broke. Rage and grief tore through him at once. Emma stepped forward, her voice small but steady. "I'm not asking for money. I just don't want to be sent away. I want my brother." Matt clung to her, his little face pressed into her shoulder. "Don't go," he said softly, his words shaking. "Stay. Always." William staggered back, unable to breathe. His son, silent for 6 years, was begging a homeless girl not to leave. A girl who might be the daughter he'd been told never existed. Felix's eyes burned with guilt. "Mr. Montgomery, I should have looked harder. I should have asked questions. But I was just a driver. I didn't think anyone would listen." He looked at Emma with something close to shame. "I think fate left her to the streets because people like me didn't do enough." Abernathy's calm veneer cracked, sweat glistening at his temple. He fiddled with his cufflinks, avoiding every pair of eyes in the room. William's voice turned sharp, dangerous. "Doctor, what aren't you telling me?" The doctor hesitated, then sighed as though dragging a confession out of his chest. "That night at the hospital, there was a choice. Your wife was in danger. The staff panicked. A decision was made. One baby was declared lost, paperwork filed, complications buried. But your wife begged for both." His gaze flicked to Emma. "It's possible. She lived, and the system failed her." The silence that followed was unbearable. The crackle of the city lights outside seemed louder than the beating of hearts in the room. William's knees nearly gave way as the truth clawed its way to the surface. Emma, tears streaking her dirt-smudged cheeks, lifted her chin. "All my life, I thought I was nobody, but maybe I was someone all along." She looked down at Matt, whose eyes shone with a joy William had never seen. His sister. The word hung in the air like a verdict. William's empire, his certainty, his grief, all of it shattered against the weight of two children holding onto each other. as though the world would tear them apart again, and somewhere deep inside him, he realized the storm had only just begun. The storm outside the penthouse windows rolled across Boston like a restless drum, thunder rumbling low against the glass. Inside, the silence between them all was heavier than the sky itself. William Montgomery stood with his back to the room, staring at the city as though answers might be carved into its skyline. His son's laughter, foreign, fragile, miraculous still, echoed behind him, a sound that felt less like joy and more like an accusation. Emma sat curled on the edge of a leather armchair, Matt pressed firmly against her side. His small hand was still wrapped around hers as though he feared she would vanish if he let go. Every time she tried to shift, he tightened his grip and whispered, "Stay." His voice was soft, but the weight of the word shattered every belief William had carried for years. Felix paced by the door, his bus driver's cap twisted nervously in his hands. He was out of place here, but he couldn't leave. Something told him this night wasn't just about a girl and her brother. It was about truth clawing its way into the light, no matter who tried to bury it. Finally, William turned. His steel blue eyes, usually so controlled, looked raw. "Enough of this," he said, though his voice shook. "I will not be played for a fool. If she claims to be my daughter, then we settle this the only way we can." He picked up his phone, his tone clipped. "Prepare a DNA test. Tonight." Emma stiffened, fear racing down her spine. She wasn't afraid of needles or machines. She was afraid of the one thing she had never had in her life, proof. What if it wasn't true? What if this bond she felt was only in her head? What if Matt's words were just a cruel trick of fate? Matt tugged at her sleeve, sensing her panic. "Don't be scared," he whispered. It was so simple, so certain, that Emma felt the strength return to her trembling legs. Felix stepped forward. "Mr. Montgomery, this isn't just about science. It's about what your eyes can see. Look at them. Same eyes, same chin. You know the truth before a test confirms it." William's jaw tightened. "I don't know anything until the numbers say so. Numbers don't lie. People do." His gaze burned into Emma. "And I won't risk my son's fragile mind on the delusions of a street child." Emma flinched at the words, but she didn't look away. Her small voice cut through the storm. "I don't want your money. I don't want your house. I just don't want to lose him again." The words hung in the room, cutting sharper than William's scorn. Even Abernathy, who had kept himself hidden in professional detachment, turned away, guilt pressing deep lines into his face. Hours passed like days. The DNA test was arranged quickly, privilege speeding the process. Emma's blood was drawn with Matt's, her hand trembling in Felix's steady grasp. William stood like a sentinel, pacing, his breath harsh in the sterile air of the private clinic. Matt never left her side, clinging to her like a lifeline. The weight was unbearable. Every tick of the clock was a hammer against William's ribs. He told himself he wanted the truth, but deep down he feared it, because if the test proved what his son already believed, then his entire life, his grief, his choices, his faith in the system would collapse into rubble. Finally, the envelope was handed to him, heavy with finality, light with paper. It might as well have been a blade. William tore it open, his fingers stiff, his eyes scanned the lines once, twice. The words blurred, but the meaning was clear. 99.9% probability of relation. Emma was his daughter, Matt's twin, the child he had buried in silence because the world told him she didn't exist. The paper slipped from William's hands, his knees buckled, and he collapsed into the nearest chair, his breath ragged. For years, he had prided himself on never breaking, on being the man who didn't bend. But tonight, he broke. Emma stared at him, her small chest heaving. "So I'm not nobody," she whispered. William lifted his head, his face pale and wet with tears he hadn't realized had fallen. His voice cracked as he said, "You were never nobody." Suspense thickened as silence swallowed them. Matt climbed into Emma's lap, wrapping his thin arms around her neck. "Sister," he said again, a smile lighting his face. His words, her name on his lips, were the final nail in William's denial. But in the shadows, Abernathy stood rigid, his eyes darting toward the floor. He knew the test was only half the truth. He knew what had been done years ago in that delivery room, the lies, the paperwork, the bribes to cover mistakes. And now that the ghosts had clawed their way into the light, he wondered how long it would be before William demanded answers no one wanted to give. The storm outside cracked with lightning, rattling the glass walls. Inside, another storm was gathering, the storm of a father's fury, a system's corruption, and a family torn apart by secrets. And Emma, fragile yet unyielding, knew this was not the end. It was only the beginning. Asterisk, the storm outside raged deep into the night, lightning, carving wide scars across the Boston sky. But the real storm was inside the Montgomery penthouse. The DNA results lay crumpled on the floor where William had dropped them, their truth undeniable. Emma was his daughter, the twin he had been told never drew breath. He sat hunched in the leather chair, his face buried in his hands. For the first time in decades, the man who had stared down entire boards of directors, who had swallowed grief behind marble walls and iron discipline, looked utterly defeated. His empire, his certainty, his very identity, none of it had prepared him for this. Emma stood a few feet away, Matt still in her lap. The boy's cheek rested against her shoulder, his soft breast brushing her collarbone. His tiny hand clung to her sleeve, as though afraid she might be ripped away again. She brushed his hair back with trembling fingers, the closeness so natural it ached. She had lived 7 years without belonging, drifting like a shadow through alleys and shelters. But sitting there with her brother's arms around her, she felt something she never had before. Home. Felix leaned against the wall, his bus driver's cap crushed in his hands, his eyes wet. He had carried guilt for years for not asking more questions, for letting a frightened pregnant woman vanish into the system. Tonight, his guilt stood in flesh and blood before him, and it was more than he could bear. It was Abernathy who shattered the fragile silence. He cleared his throat, his voice sharp with unease. "Mr. Montgomery," he began, but William's head snapped up, eyes blazing. "You knew," William hissed. His voice was raw, jagged with rage and grief. "Didn't you? You knew something." That night, the doctor's mask of calm faltered. He adjusted his cufflinks, then his tie, stalling for time, but William was already rising, his tall frame looming like a storm ready to break. "You stood by me as I buried one child and clung to another. You watched me pay for every test, every therapy, every damn treatment. All the while my daughter was out there on the streets." His voice cracked, his fists trembling. "What did you do?" Abernathy's composure shattered. "It wasn't supposed to happen this way." The words spilled out, his hands shaking. "There were complications in the delivery. Your wife lost too much blood. The staff panicked, too many lives slipping away at once. They said one twin wouldn't make it. But she was breathing, faintly, weak. The hospital didn't want the liability, so they filed it as a loss and passed the child to the state system quietly. A mistake, a cover-up." Emma's breath hitched, the room spinning. You threw me away." Her voice was small, but the pain in it sliced like glass. Abernathy's face crumpled. "I told myself you wouldn't survive, that I was sparing your father the burden of more grief, but I was wrong. I was a coward." William's fist slammed into the wall, the sound echoing through the penthouse like a gunshot. His face twisted with fury. "You let my daughter rot in the streets while I mourned her death. You lied to me. You stole 7 years of her life." Felix stepped forward, his voice shaking but firm. "And yet she lived, through hunger, through cold, through everything the city threw at her. She's stronger than any of us." He looked at Emma, his voice softening. "She found her way back, because family doesn't stay buried forever." William turned, his chest heaving. He looked at Emma, at the dirt smudges on her face, the ragged jacket too thin for winter, the fire in her small eyes that no storm could put out. And for the first time in 7 years, he let his walls fall completely. He fell to his knees before her, the mighty William Montgomery undone. His hands trembled as they reached for hers. "Emma," he whispered, his voice broken. "Forgive me. I should have known. I should have searched. I let them tell me you were gone, and I buried you in my heart to survive." Emma's tears spilled freely. For years she had been invisible, forgotten, discarded. Now the man who was supposed to have been her father knelt before her, begging forgiveness. She looked down at Matt, who smiled sleepily in her lap, and then back at William. Her voice was soft, but steady. "I don't need your money," she said. "I just need you not to let me go again." William broke, tears streaming freely now. He pulled both children into his arms, holding them as though the world might tear them away. Matt giggled softly between sobs, clinging to his sister, whispering, "Stay, stay, stay," over and over. Felix turned away, wiping his eyes. He had seen many things in his years driving buses through the city, the worst of people, The best of them, but never a miracle like this. Abernathy stood in the corner, shame consuming him. His empire of credentials and prestige was worthless. Now, he knew William could destroy him with a word. But the real punishment was standing there watching a father embrace both children, knowing he had stolen those years from them. As dawn began to break across the city, the first rays of sunlight pierced the penthouse glass. William Montgomery, a man who never believed in miracles, sat on the floor with his son in one arm and his daughter in the other. For the first time in his life, he whispered words softer than steel, words no business empire could ever teach him. Maybe miracles, he said, voice trembling, are just family finding their way home. And Emma, no longer a nameless girl of the streets, leaned into her father's embrace, knowing the fight for her place in this world was finally over.